Thanks, President. Across the nation, Americans wonder if Washington is working for them. Congress's approval rate, as we know so well, is an abysmal 13%, 12%, different surveys, but not very good. One factor contributing to this distrust is the sense that elites in Washington are using their positions to get ahead financially. Members of Congress have the privilege and the honor of being elected to serve the public. Unfortunately, some elected officials have used the information they've acquired through service to the public, and I might put service to the public in quotation marks, to enrich their stock holdings. That's wrong. Public servants should not receive financial benefits for the votes they cast or the issues they work on. That's why I appreciate the work that Senator Gillibrand and Senator Lieberman and Senator Collins are doing in this legislation. How many articles do we have to read about the appearance of impropriety on the investment decisions of lawmakers and their staffs? Washington Post article in June of 2010, Taxpayers for Common Sense said in this article, by being on a committee with a particular jurisdiction, they, members of Congress, members of the Senate, are in a better position of influencing the performance of their investments, or at least appearing to have that ability. I'm not saying my colleagues do that. I think perhaps some do. I don't know that. But I do know that the appearance to the public is that members of the Senate are in a position to enrich themselves on a variety of issues and investments. The Washington Post article in December 2010, the Project on Government Oversight, this was in about a year, 13, 14 months ago, this article. It's a problem. They'll come back and say that it's ludicrous that I would think of my stocks, that they only think about the nation's interests and that of their constituents. The problem is we can't know. And that's exactly right, we can't know. And here's a USA Today editorial from just yesterday. If lawmakers were really concerned with ethics, they'd put their equity holdings in blind trusts so they wouldn't have the obvious conflict of interest that comes from setting the rules for the companies they own. Banking committee members wouldn't invest in financial institutions. Armed Service Committee members wouldn't invest in defense contractors. Energy Committee members wouldn't invest in oil companies. These stories simply don't reflect well on the world's greatest deliberative body. Most of us think these investments don't affect our decisions here. They probably don't. But isn't it time we held ourselves to a higher standard? That's what the Stock Act's all about. Senator Merkley and I want to go further than that. The Senate's considering the Stock Act, which clarifies the insider trading laws, that they apply the same way to members of Congress as they do to people in the rest of the country. But the Stock Act only deals with insider trading. Very important, but that's only a small part of this city's problem. I want to go further. Senator Merkley and I are proposing the putting the People's Interests First Act, an amendment to the Stock Act. It would require that all senators and their senior staffs, probably their legislative director, their most senior legislative person, and their chief of staff, all senators and their senior staff, those who are subject to financial disclosure, their top paid people, to sell individual stocks, divest themselves of individual stocks that create conflicts, or place all of those individual stock investments in blind trust. No one's required to avoid equities. We could still invest in broad-based mutual funds, not an energy or a healthcare mutual fund, but broad-based mutual funds or exchange-traded funds. This rule would be similar. We've already done this in a limited way here. This rule would be similar to steps that have already been taken to address financial conflicts of interest. Senate Ethics Rule 37.7 requires committee staff making more than $25,000 a year to, quote, divest himself, herself of any substantial holdings which may be directly affected by the actions of the committee for which that person works, unless the Ethics Committee proposes an alternative arrangement. The Armed Services Committee requires all staff and spouses and dependents to divest themselves of stock in companies doing business with the Department of Defense and the Department of Energy. The committee does permit the use of blind trust. That's virtually every stock, frankly. The executive branch federal rules, federal criminal law generally prohibit employees, their spouses, and their children from owning stock in companies they regulate. All Senator Merkley and I are saying is that members of the Senate should hold themselves to the same standard that we require of committee staff. We tell committee staff they can't do this, and executive branch employees, why should we be allowed to do this? If we think this is a sacrifice, which it really isn't, Mr. President, ultimately. Let's remember that while median net worth of all Americans dropped 8% from 2004 to 2010, median net worth of members of Congress jumped 15% over that same period. It's not a judgment of my colleagues. It's simply what we should do. It's what the public would want us to do. Some argue that selling our stock will make us lose touch with the rest of society. That thinking falls on deaf ears for most Americans. Why should members of the Senate vote on issues that affect the oil industry while they own oil stock? Why should they vote on issues that affect pharmaceuticals if they own big pharma stocks? Appearance matters. Right now, the American people do not trust that we're acting in the nation's best interests far too often. I'll close with this, and then Senator Merkley, we'll turn to Senator Merkley. Public service is a privilege. Folks around Washington are paid pretty well for what we do, are paid very well for what we do. We take these jobs seriously. We should take them seriously. We should look at them as the privilege they are to serve in the greatest deliberative body in the world and get to serve in my state 11 million people. In Senator Gillibrand's state, 15 million people, something like that. In Senator Merkley's state, I mean, millions of people we serve, and it's a privilege to do it. There's no reason that our colleagues need to be buying and selling stocks in multi-million-dollar portfolios. And when asked about the fact that Senate Armed Services Committee conflict of interest rules apply only to staff and to DOD appointees, President Bush's Deputy Secretary of Defense, Gordon England, said, "I think Congress should live by the rules they impose on other people." In the State of the Union, the president said, "Let's limit any elected officials from owning stocks in industries they impact." Everything we do in this body, almost everything we do, committee hearings, floor sessions, calls to agencies affect businesses and the profits businesses make or don't make. That's why Senator Merkley and I are introducing this amendment. It's simple, it's direct. The public should expect nothing else.